Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the week 3 of the Formula G Show Season 2. I am Zotomo, and my normal guest is back. Calamity, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're a little bit behind because of your little absence, but we're here to make up for you with a couple videos in a couple days to catch ourselves right up. And the first thing we got for you today is the South Korea matchup. Which was really interesting. A very unique country, South Korea, mainly because of its crazy map, Calamity.
Yeah, it's not the most helpful map. A lot of it is just in Korean, even if you ignore all of the blurriness that you get if you try to zoom in. Probably biggest annoyance is that road numbers barely show up unless you're really far zoomed in. So looking for those can be a nightmare. And yeah, even then, finding the location in Street View itself is also not so easy because, well, quite a lot of it is just in Korean. And most of the official signs that you find that are actually useful to you provide you with a city name and a road number. And as we've already said, road number might be helpful if you already
Not
know where
helpful.
you are, but not
Mhm.
helpful in finding out the general region. So what you're usually left with is just trying to scour the map and trying to find wherever the city is. And that's sometimes easier than other times.
Yeah, definitely. It can depend on a lot of things and how challenging the locations are. So let's take a look at those locations for the sprint, not the sprint race, for the feature race. To start us off, round one, Calamity, we were in the southeast of the country, just northeast of Busan, a pretty major port town.
Yeah, sort of in the middle between Busan and Ulsan, two pretty big cities. In the smaller town of Jeongwan, um, I don't quite remember. I think if you went east, there were some useful signs pointing you towards either Busan or Ulsan. I don't quite remember. So that gave you the
Yeah.
general region. And from that, Jeongwan wasn't too difficult to find. But again, that was one of the difficult parts is it's always very hard to tell if the city you found on the sign is going to be big enough to for you to be able to find it on the map. Um,
Mhm.
Pretty much what the general good rule is anything that's written in like black on the map is easy enough to find, and anything that's written in like this gray kind of color you have to zoom in very far for, and you probably won't find it. Jeongwan was one of those, but you know it's on a sign. It's written like anything else in reality. So
Mhm.
I personally spent quite a bit of time looking for that. But yeah, once you found the bigger cities nearby, it's not too difficult. And it wasn't too difficult to pinpoint either, because for a change, not usually the case, but for this one, there was a POI for a Hyundai shop right next to your starting location. So that was quite nice.
Yeah, just kind of knew what two towns I was between, and you didn't have distances, if I remember right. And so it
Correct.
was just like, well, maybe I'm closer to Busan. It's pretty developed. And then time ran out, and I was like a town away or something. Was I maybe 2 towns away um, from the actual location? So my worst round came in this one. But again, most of us were able to figure out the general area given those town names were pretty easy to spot there. Round two was a really interesting location because it took us to the nice, well, at least in Korea, tropical island of Jeju, a very common resort location.
Yeah, and it put us in a very rural location. That was also a bit annoying to navigate. And you had quite a few signs giving you some very, very small towns in the general area. If you managed to find out or figure out you were in Jeju very early on, then you might have had enough time to just look for those towns because it's not the biggest island. Um,
Mm.
the annoying thing for me personally was it also you came upon a sign that told you, okay, if you go west, you get to the 1132, and if you go east, you get to the 1136. Might have been the opposite way around, I don't remember. Point being,
Mm.
you know, it told you those two roads are here, and those two roads intersect in only one place. That is in the far southwest of the island, which is not where the location was at all. So that was very great. But apparently people found other things because a lot of people got very close in that round.
Yeah, I found like the 1136, 1132, but also I found the 1112 as a number. So it was like, okay, we're in this little area around here, and I was trying to figure out small, tiny little roads and them not showing up at a zoom level that I wanted them to, and whatnot, and time ran out. So not too bad. Very few aces, but a lot of 4 8s and 4 9s in this one for people. So again, Korea being the way it is, it's not too hard to get sort of close. You get some clues like road numbers or city names, but then pinpointing can be really hard with how the road names show up on the map and whatnot. So everybody just a little bit off, if nothing else, than just too far down the road for that one. Round 3 saw us head over to the crazy industrial area of Incheon, to the west, sort of west southwest of Seoul.
Yeah, and you could pretty easily tell that it is a big city. I think there were signs for Incheon in a lot of different places. So that wasn't the difficult part, but the difficult part was figuring out where in this massive city you are. And quite a lot of people struggled with that. We only had, I think it was 4 perfect scores in that round. No, 5 perfect scores, but lots of people being like just a few meters off, like 20, 30, 40 meters off. The actual location was also like about 5 to 10 meters off the road on Google Maps. So that also didn't help. But yeah, you were kind of just placed in like an odd area where if you went south, you kind of made it from like the big Incheon to like a smaller part that probably still belongs to it, but there's like a bit of an empty area between those two. Um, and in and of itself, it's quite far southwest of the main town. So definitely not the easiest location to find.
Yeah. Yeah, what tricked me up was we saw some signs to the 110, and the 110 is in 2 different places that are parallel to each other. And I was like, what? And so I went north of an empty area and near the 110, and it was the other 110 that was the actual location. So again, in the general ballpark, but just a little bit off of that for me as well. But yeah, I was really like kind of flummoxed by the road signs. I was like, why does this feel right, but then not right? Like all the numbers and names match up, but then none of the buildings. I was like, I don't know what's going on. So a bit tricky there for that. Round 4 saw us head to the southwest of the country, just outside of Gwangju. For that one, again, the bigger city names not too hard to spot, but then a bit tricky to get the actual location for this one.
Yeah, I think
Actually, it was pretty overall. It was even easier than round 3.
yeah,
Now that I look at it.
yeah, this was definitely just looking at all of the results and my own experience as well. This was definitely the easiest round out of the 5. Lots of 5Ks. I honestly, I remember me pinpointing. I don't, it's been like 4 or 5 weeks. I don't remember how I or where I got the information, but it must have been pretty close by. And I think what it was probably the road number, and then you could just look at the side roads, at the names of the side roads, and just look along the 13, and eventually you'll just find the right one.
Yeah, exactly. You did have some town names in the distance there, as well as the little side roads, and that they do show up if you zoom in close enough. So then, yeah, you just basically spend a couple minutes or less scrolling around down the 13 for that actual location, and then it just pops right up there for you. So not too bad at all. Round 5 saw us move to just outside of Gimje, if I'm pronouncing that right, on the west coast, which is probably like the most unfamiliar location to some people, just in the sense that it's not like a big name like Busan or Incheon or Jeju or something. But overall, scores pretty good at this one too.
Yeah, that's probably the location I remember the least out of all of them. I don't really have any clue what I found there. I think it was think it was Iksan that I eventually found on the map, and uh, there was a couple other things that I kept looking for things. I think I
Mhm.
was on the map for like a good part of 3 minutes, if not more, just
Yeah.
looking for something. In the end, I had no idea where we actually were. I just knew the general area, and not even that I didn't have time to start pinpointing. I just wouldn't have even known where to start with. But
Mhm.
still, I think it was more 5Ks than in round three. I think we had
Mhm.
6 5Ks here. But yeah, quite a few people got the general area, but didn't quite know where exactly we started.
Yeah, there was the 29, pretty major road. I think even the 23 was on a sign somewhere if I remember right. And then you just can trace back those small side roads, and I just ran out of time before I could find the actual rerun. So I was literally like one neighborhood over from the actual location. And I once the good old timer runs out, you go, oh, there's the road I was looking for right there, and you just couldn't see it in the 30 seconds you had to try to find it for that one. But yeah, so that I mean that's a really interesting seed for Korea. Like it didn't prove to be lacking in information, but it did prove to be a little bit tricky in putting that to use. You had to spend a lot of time on the map. The some of the intersections and whatnot were a bit tricky to actually pinpoint, but in the overall, drivers in the right areas for this one.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the results, how everybody finished up in this. For that, Boxa, Moist Flubber, and Orpheus take the podiums in that respective order. Nobody getting a perfect game in this one, just off by 2 points for actually our top three drivers. Mr. Blue, Xander, Berry Fishy Bear closed. Jack, Einarglu, and the Baseman ran out that top 10. I just missed out Calamity on my first point of the season, 11th. But I was still almost 300 points off of M the Basement, so quite a big gap there for that. Not a very good week for you though overall, Calamity, 18th, down there pretty far for that. Two drivers not even participating in Simi and Slovak Goli, not able to play in time this week. Anything interesting here for you, Calamity, on these results?
Yeah, I think the results are not too surprising if we look at, who finished in the top 10. But I mean, to be honest, by now, most of these players in this competition are very good. So regardless of who will get in the top 10, I wouldn't be too surprised.
Mhm.
For me personally, I was actually, the one thing I was surprised about was how well everyone did, because I thought, like, I knew I messed up Jeju, but other than that, I thought I did pretty well. So to finish 18th was a bit surprising to me. But yeah, Boxer and Moist Flubber obviously have been kind of dominating the competition so far. Yep, they keep doing it in the feature races at least. I haven't been paying too much attention to the sprint race results. I was out sick.
Mhm.
I was playing my own games and trying to do my best, but I wasn't paying too much attention to what the general classification looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, very nice for them indeed. Yeah, so a really strong showing from everybody in South Korea, which is always nice to see. Let's switch over to our sprint race, and we were in the capital, of course, of Seoul. And Seoul is one of those Asian capitals, very, very dense, very confusing, lots of small little streets, but a very interesting place to play for sure. Our first location, at least for me, all the drivers had the same 5 locations, but they were shuffled their order. For my first location, it was in Gangnam, a very famous district because of the song when I was in university a long time ago. And we actually, the biggest thing for me here, Calamity, was we were really close to a subway station, which is easy to find with a couple minutes.
Yep, close to the Yeoksum subway station. I actually never made that connection with the song, to be honest. But either way, yeah, that was not too difficult to find if you had enough time and just kept looking at subway stations. Because while you have to zoom in pretty far for a lot of things to stand out in the South Korean map, subway stations, thankfully, are not one of them. So you could find it that way. You could also just generally look for road names. I don't remember finding anything saying Gangnam during the round,
Yeah, I
but
don't
I
think I did
assume,
either. I think it was just a subway.
yeah, I assume because looking at it, the Gangnam Station is about like 500 meters west of the start. So I assume if you made it there, you probably found that as well, written somewhere at least. But yeah, definitely. It was definitely the one that was furthest out there in terms of away from the main part of the city. So I'm assuming that tripped up some people, but not too difficult to pinpoint in general because we're right next to a Starbucks that actually shows up on the map, thankfully.
Yeah.
Another curious thing about the South Korean map, most of the things are written in Korean, but apparently foreign restaurants are not one of those things. But yeah, I just struggled because as far as I remember, the street sign that pointed or that told you the name of the street you're in was actually wrong. I don't know if it's the street sign itself or if the map is wrong, but I think the number was different than it is on the map.
Yes, because I guessed on the opposite side of the road. So like there's like the T intersection, and I guessed on the side that the name was correct, but then the pinpoint was across the street. So if I would have looked at the points of interest, you would have been able to figure it out. But I was drawn by the name, and I was like, wait a minute, what? So yeah, it was a little bit tricky.
Yeah,
I think it just changes number across the road or something.
I just looked it up again in Street View. The sign that you've got there tells you you're on road 11, like Teheran Row 11. The road you're actually on, according to the map, is road 25. So that's why I spent quite a lot of time figuring out if it actually is the right road because the names don't match up. And eventually I just ran out of time about 22 meters away from the right place.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, Gangnam is like the high class rich suburb of Seoul. So it's where all the clubs are, it's where all high fashion and parties and that kind of stuff. So that's where the song comes from. And with the rise of K-pop, got international fame. But anyways, round 2 saw us in a little bit of a tricky location on some side roads, tucked away and near some small shops. But the best bet here, Calamity, was probably to find your way to the river, which we weren't too far away from, and use the bridge to help you pinpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Also, all bridges, I think, usually you find the name of the bridge on the signs. They sometimes don't match up what the bridge is actually called. I don't 100% remember if it was the case here, but even if the name of the bridge might have not matched up, the road itself that you're close to, the major road, is named the same as the bridge. So even then you could have made that connection there. So overall, as long as you made your way to the bridge, probably not too difficult to find out generally, and also not too difficult to pinpoint because you were relatively close to some side streets. So that was overall, it was my second fastest location in just over a minute.
Very nice. Round 3 saw us in a very strange location. We were kind of stuck underneath a bridge and a highway and no real way to get out of it. Not a whole lot of information. There was a few signs with some names, so you might have been able to find it, which some drivers obviously did, with just enough map scrolling. But in terms of actually going out, getting some, like we normally do in Geoguessr, finding some decent information, working your way back to that starting location, not really possible. You just gotta take what you had and just spend most of the time on your map on this one, Calamity.
Yeah, you could walk a bit to the west, a bit to the east. I didn't find a single Latin letter. It was just from the way that the bridge, the direction of the bridge, as well as that little roundabout below the bridge, it was just kind of the only location that made sense. Because there's a limited amount of bridges that go northwest, southeast in Seoul. I think it's about 4, maybe 5 at most, and 2 of those are, I think, outside of Seoul anyway. So it's like 3 bridges you have to check, and only one of them has a roundabout below it. So that was kind of the only place that made any sense, even if it didn't look quite right, because the little bit of road you actually could travel on to the east, at least, just wasn't on the map at all. But overall, I still think for most people, it shouldn't have been too much issue. It was one of those rounds where you're like, this kind of has to be it. It doesn't quite fit, but there's no other place that even makes any sense at all. So you kind of wait out the time, and you're like, maybe I'll find something else, and then time runs out, and you're either right or wrong.
Okay. Well, I had a hard time getting out of it in the actual game, but I just managed to get on the bridge. So
yeah, I think
and if you manage to click your way mysteriously by just getting lucky, there is plenty of signs that say Bompo Bridge, as well as some other Bompo. So that might have been something that drivers were able to use.
You have to say though that movement, I don't know why, but movement is slightly differently in Geoguessr itself compared to Street View. So it can be easier to get to, for example, the bridge in just Google Street View than it actually is in Geoguessr sometimes.
Yeah, that might have something to do with it as well. Round 4 saw us on a highway, not under one this time, number 66, to sort of the northwest of Seoul. Not too tricky on this one, Calamity, except for just kind of figuring out your exact location, as you know normally a problem with being on a highway. But plenty of information again to help you narrow down where along that highway you are.
Yeah, there were some signs, some very rare signs in Korea with distances on it, just east of the starting location. There was one that said 3.5 kilometers to Volgok, which is a location with a subway station as well that I thankfully found in one of my practice games of Seoul. So I had a good idea of where we kind of had to be. There were a couple of buildings across the road from the bridge, the Home Plus building mainly, that made it not easy, but easier to pinpoint. And I still managed to be 2 meters too far away to get a perfect score. But yeah, probably one of the easier rounds as well.
Very nice for that. Yeah, and then finally round 5 was by far the easiest one, and where I got half of my points. Believe it or not, I either found the location and was pretty close, or I was absolutely god-awful far away from it. Round 5 was right next to Seoul train station, the major train station in the city. Plenty of clues as well as good pinpointing information to help you out with there. Not a whole lot to talk about here, except just, yeah, you look up, there's the train station, there's the points of interest, there you go. Took most people hardly any time at all. I did tour around a little bit just to make sure I had the right side of the station. It's very large, so I didn't want to be turned around and on the wrong side of it or something, but I knew where I was within probably 30 seconds, a minute, no problem. So
yeah, definitely the easiest round of the 5.
Okay, well, let's see how everybody fared in the sprint race, and overall at least a lot more perfect scores, 4 of them, with Jackie S, Mr. Blue, and Max taking the podium spots. Labon Greb also getting a perfect game but missing out on the top 3 by just 2 meters. The Baseman, Calamity, you turned your fortunes around, being 6th, Boxa, Moist Flubber, Closed, Orbucka, Tall Impala, rounding out that top 10 or so. Yeah, the other end of the side, kind of points dropped off pretty fast, especially towards the bottom. You could obviously tell people who are not familiar with the city or just had really hard time finding any clues amongst the Korean mayhem that can be sold there. Quite a few under 10,000 points as well, but even by some very good drivers. So
yeah, and I think it's a rarity to see 20,967 points still finish you inside the top 10. So definitely a difficult map generally. Definitely a map that if you practiced a bit, made sure you had a much better chance of actually finishing in the points. But still, just one completely wrong guess makes sure you drop out of the points entirely.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, let's look at how the standing is shaping up for our drivers after race 3. Boxa, Moist Flubber, and Mr. Blue take those podium spots. Boxa 105 points, Moist Flubber 84, Mr. Blue 54. So you can see there's quite a big lead there for Boxa and Moist Flubber. Of course, there are lots of points up for grabs every week, so they're not exactly safe, but they've definitely got a little bit of a cushion for themselves there. Orpheus and Arglu right now that top 5. Calamity, you're sitting at 12th with 20 points, not too bad. That middle of the pack is pretty tight, 29 points in 8th place with Raban Greb down to about 15 or 16 points there with kind of End the Basement down around 15th. For that, 3 drivers still yet to score any points, me, Shumi, and Slovak Goli. Slovak Goli has actually had a couple DNSs, so that's mostly why he hasn't had any points. Shumi just not having the best start after a very good Reddit League season as well as Season 1 in Formula G. And yeah, I've been really close, but just outside the points every single time so far for that one.
Yeah, it is. It is curious how Shumi, because he did pretty poorly in Season 1 as well, and then had that Reddit League season in Division 3 where he just won pretty much against anyone, and now he's doing very poorly in Formula G again. That is a bit strange, but maybe he's just not practicing at all for these games or playing them blindly. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, Reddit League is a head-to-head, so like even if you're not doing that great, as long as you beat your opponent, you're going to be really high up in the standings. In this case, it's everybody versus everybody. So even if you put up a 24-5, if there's 6 or 7 25Ks, then you're going to be way down on the list. So definitely can be very tricky. And the city maps are very small for the sprint race, which means even being 10, 15, 20 meters away means you lose a lot of points very, very fast. So that a different aspect of things as well, I think, that Formula G brings to the table for these drivers. But yeah, last season's winner closed 24/7, sitting at 16th right now, a long way down the list here. Not really doing too well, but our newcomer is definitely dominating those top positions here. And then for the constructor challenge, our drivers compete in teams of 2 for their teams to see how they finish up. Nordhagen, of course, bolstered by Boxa, taking the top spot, 130 points. Chariot and Scanstrom finishing out those top 3. Opava, Octane, and Lancaster towards the bottom there. Not yet to break 20 points for them. But a bunch of teams stuck around the middle. 37 for Bamberg, Cape, 45. Katservatsa, 58. FGT, your team, Calamity, doing quite well in 4th, 59. So again, lots of points up for grabs still and lots of weeks still to go. So nothing really set in stone yet, but definitely shaping up to see who the favorites might be in this season, Calamity.
Yeah, but it feels a lot closer than it did last season, the Constructors' Championship especially. The drivers is a bit more distanced than it was last season between the top and sort of the middle of the pack. But here in the Constructors' standings, I feel like last season we had our 3-4 top teams that were kind of running away with it, and we had our sort of 3 teams at the bottom. We kind of see a bit of that. You've got a bit of a gap between Oberhausen in 8th. Oh, is that 8th? 9th, actually, the 3 teams below it, but it's just 12 points at this point. That could still quite easily turn around. So definitely an interesting season to come.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to it. Yeah, and next week, week 4, will see us head over to Italy. We're going to be on the Italy map made by Mapper, an average score of only 16,477. It's been played almost 6,000 times with over 1,000 locations and 206 likes. Our sprint race, we were in Italy last season, but we are in Florence this time for our city. For this, I know your thoughts about Italy, Calamity. I think we've both made that quite clear over the seasons here. But anything you like to add about Italy, or in particular Florence as a city for our sprint race?
I feel like I'm playing Italy every other week in some kind of competition. Italy for me in general is always a map where I can get seeds where I feel like it's super easy and everything goes great and I'm right at the top, and then I get seeds where I'm like, I have no idea where any of this is. I think it's mainly the mountainous regions in sort of the middle center to kind of like the region around Genoa or somewhere around there that usually have very little in the way of useful signs. So whenever you're in that kind of region, I tend to struggle. But yeah, Italy is pretty diverse, and we can get a fun seed. I hope we get a fun seed. Yeah, Florence in particular, I've made my hatred for Italian cities in that regard clear as well. I hated wait, what's the English name? Is it just Milan? Is Milan the
Yeah,
English
Milan.
name? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm never quite sure. Mailand is the German name, and I don't.
Yeah.
I think Milan.
Milan,
Yeah,
Milano.
yeah. Milano is the Italian name. Just a
Yeah.
bit confusing, but yeah, Florence not much better. It is slightly better just by way of it being a
Yeah.
smaller city, and you've got a river running through it, so that can help you out quite a bit as well. And I
Mm.
think it also looks nicer than Milan, but that's a different matter.
Yeah, I think Milan is quite a nice city, but it's definitely not easy to navigate. I've been there before in person, and I've been to Florence too. But yeah, Milan, you can get lost and get turned around and pretty easily. But Florence, a little bit more straightforward. Lots of famous bridges that cross the river, and so that's definitely going to be something that the drivers are going to be looking to use. And I think it just feels less dense to me, Florence. Right? It feels like a city that has bigger roads, which are easier to spot. Maybe there's plenty of parks and historical landmarks to help you kind of pinpoint a little bit, figure out where you are, so you're not relying on names only. And of course that river, which is a big help, cutting the city in almost in half there. So definitely looking forward to it. And hopefully the seed won't be too bad, so we don't have Calamity complaining too much next week in Italy. So now we'll see you all then. Take care.
Bye.